Let me commence by saying good morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK and Europe. Good early evening to our friends in Dubai. Good evening to our friends in India, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia. Good late evening to our friends in Australia. Hope you are well. Because it's about 7 weeks since the last Q&A session, we have a lot of questions. And I'm going to try to get through about 8 of them. The first one was about the Ukraine situation. So the question was, with this situation occurring, which is affecting a lot of people's minds, how do we practice with it? Well, it's a good question because obviously incursions, invasions, wars, images of bombs, destruction, news about deaths is depressing and can stimulate feelings of anxiety and all sorts of unwholesome things, anger, self-righteous anger. And so I think one of the most important things to keep in mind, and I think we should have learned this by now, but we keep needing to relearn it. And that's that we really can't trust our news sources. And you will, just in recent history, you will all remember having been told that there are going to be lockdowns and quarantines for 2 weeks to slow the curve. And 2 years later, we have this ongoing, interesting phenomenon where people have less human rights and rich people got richer. And so we really do need to be mindful that corporate-owned media doesn't necessarily tell the truth. So, or I would even say rarely tells the truth. Let's just be frank about this. So one of my biggest pieces of advice to you is don't watch much news. And you will find that the Ukraine situation affects you much less. Most of the news, I've had a quick look at it myself, most of the news seems to be presented in the usual moronic, divisive way, where Putin is an evil character and Zelensky is a hero, and everybody should all aim their rage and hatred at this one character. And everybody should go and, I mean, people from other countries are enlisting and going to fight against Russians because, you know, that's the kind of message that they're being told, is that Ukraine is entirely innocent, Putin is entirely evil. The appropriate thing to do at this time is go and kill the Russian invaders. So what all I can say is, what I find helpful is to admit that I don't know. I don't know, did President Putin have, in his position as a leader of a country of 140 million people, did he have valid, very valid concerns? Maybe. Is Zelensky perfectly innocent and perfectly good human being? Possibly not. What is wholesome for Buddhist practitioners is to have compassion for the human situation and for people whose minds are affected by greed, hatred, and delusion. So that includes Putin as well as Zelensky. And yeah, so when I think of the situation, I spread metta to the Russians and the Ukrainians. And I actually recently had a chance to go and chant and meditate at the Emerald Buddha in Bangkok. and it's a place with a repository of a great deal of good energy. And after I dedicated merit to my teachers, my relatives, my students, the villagers, I spent a good half an hour spreading loving kindness to President Putin, because aiming ill will, self-righteous anger, hatred at somebody who's already has an agitated mind, who just happens to have a lot of nuclear missiles, it's not skillful. So I was spreading metta to him, visualizing the Buddha's blessings inside his heart and making a humble request. Please don't use nuclear weapons, because we Buddhists would like to be able to continue our Buddhist practice for a bit longer. So, expose yourself to as little news as is necessary. Luang Por Chah says, when practicing with all of our practice, we have to have what the phrase "mein air," not sure, not sure. We have to have a lot of this not sure awareness. When I'm looking at a lot of people, probably a similar age to me and older than me, we all remember the coalition of the willing invading Iraq because Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. 3,000 people had died from the World Trade Towers in New York. So, of course, the coalition of the willing, Australia, UK, France, Germany, America, went and blew up a whole bunch of things in Iraq. And it was discovered that there were no weapons of mass destruction. It's basically admitted now. 2 million Iraqis died as a consequence of that war. And many, many thousands of American soldiers, many more than the people who were in the World Trade Towers. So we need to take the various claims we hear with a very, very big truck full of salt. So we can't trust our corporate-owned media. We can't trust the people who in government who are supposed to represent us. And that's just kind of depressing. I admit that it's depressing, but I think we as Buddhists who are committed to contemplating truth, understanding truth, being liberated from ignorance through seeing things truthfully, we have to be able to take this on the chin. There are a lot of people in the world that you can't trust. Okay. The good news is you don't have to believe their fear-mongering. If you don't trust them, then you don't believe what they're saying. You don't have to feel that a nuke's going to drop on your head any moment because Hillary Clinton said so. But anyway, it's tough. It is a depressing process when you realize that elected leaders, military spokespeople, and media, that a lot of people are lying to you. It's an unpleasant realization, but it's a necessary one. Then you don't have to waste time listening to what they're saying. Use your time, and you don't have to let them manipulate your emotions. And probably have more time for practice, and your practice will increase the general level of merit in the world, and the likelihood of a bomb landing on your head will be less. So, next question, JC.
Thank you, Prajan. Prajan, question 2. If you ask someone to read out a list to assist in recollecting one's good deeds when approaching death, is this actually some wholesome or skillful? The person seems to be asking for something in return. I thought that one should not attach to one's own good deeds after it has been done. Seeking your teaching and clarification if I'm on the right track. Thank you, Ajahn.
When we practice generosity of any type, it's skillful to rejoice in that offering. So obviously there needs to be some nuance in what we're doing. We're trying to brighten and gladden the mind. So this is even before it's a skillful tradition from Sri Lanka where people do make a note of the wholesome things they've done, and have a relative or carer, friend, read this out as they're approaching their death to recollect the good things. But in your daily life, when you are generous, you recollect that that was a skillful thing to do, and you rejoice with the skillfulness. And the point is to brighten and gladden the mind. If one starts making stories about and telling a lot of people how generous one is, and starts creating a big ego around one's generosity, that's a different thing. So nobody's instructing anybody to do that. The instruction is to rejoice. This is mudita brahmavihara, wholesome divine emotion. So when you can rejoice in your own goodness and your own good activities, it makes it easier to rejoice in others. We shouldn't have a kind of a stingy withholding of divine emotions. We should be able to rejoice with wholesomeness. One of the things Ajahn explains that I find helpful is that in the beginning stages of practice, we have to try to maintain a deva-like mind state. So obviously devas have a self-view. They have a personality. They think themselves as well. But they're kind, generous, they rejoice, they forgive, they're patient. Oftentimes they have faith in wholesome things, brightens their minds. So we have to try to take care of that human level of morality, deva-like level of inner goodness. That's the foundation for insight. So you can't just be instructing yourself to not have any greed, or not have any hatred, or not have any vanity, and instruct yourself to have insight. It doesn't work. You have to have a glad, bright, contented mind, because and then you apply that. That's the foundation. You apply yourself to working with meditation objects and contemplative meditations in order to develop and deepen and experience insight. But being a conventionally happy being is recommended. It's the consequence of being generous and ethical, cultivating metta, forgiving. One should, in general, experience more well-being and happiness. And of course, life is very challenging, and no one's expecting anybody to have a unshakable, unchanging, happy state. But in general, Buddhist practice, if we're more generous and more virtuous, there should be more well-being. There should be more contentment. And then that is the foundation. So when it comes to the time of death, understanding that many people are working with racking pain and debilitating weakness can be depressing. So you just let a person lie on a bed, they can't feed themselves, they've got tubes coming out of them, there's a lot of pain. It's pretty easy in that situation for the mind to fall into ghost-like states of self-pity and depression. And then when the mind falls to a depressed state, it will tends to kind of like pick at old wounds and pick at old scabs. It's like a certain vibration that when the mind gets in a negative rut, it's like cows chewing over the cud. It mulls over things that keep the mind miserable. It's like a vibration when those kind of files are the ones that are in the in-tray. They feed off each other. So this practice of remembering the good things that one did in one's life is very wholesome, because it's like, yeah, it wasn't all bad. It wasn't just that my husband spoke to me harshly and my children didn't treat me fairly, and my boss fired me instead of giving the promotion. When I was giving the sharing 2 weeks ago about the inner journey of my process of being an abbot for 11 years, building a monastery, it was very interesting as I was thinking about what I would talk about. I could have easily talked for 3 hours about people who didn't keep their agreements, people who betrayed me, people who tried to, intimidate, people who were jealous, people who were competitive, people who were bitchy, people who said untruths behind my back. I could have, if I wanted to, spent 3 hours talking about all of the opportunities I had to be betrayed, disappointed, hurt, and depressed, dejected by my experiences of humanity in taking on this big project. But it wouldn't be helpful. And fortunately, I have enough mindfulness and clear comprehension to be aware that for every one person who didn't keep their agreement, 10 new people who I didn't even know turned up and were exceedingly generous. For every betrayal, there were 10 beautiful, incredibly generous gestures from people I hardly knew. And new people turned up who rose to the occasion to remarkable levels and helped me accomplish many things in many ways. And so I could also talk for 3 hours about just how many nice people did nice things. And but that wouldn't be perfectly balanced either. But the point is, it's samsara, it's the conditioned realm, and it's a human realm, and there is praise and blame, and there is gain and loss, and there is good people and bad people, and there's day and there's night, and we all have our fair share of all of it. But the point is, when we focus on the positive things, we can have a bright, happy, glad mind state. And so I train myself. If I do find myself, the mind gets in kind of a scab picking, mulling over the old wounds mood, I remind myself, before I'm dying, this is important because I need to establish these habits. Is there anything I would be grateful for? Who helped me this lifetime? Who taught me? What did they teach me? What do I have to be thankful for? And there's a lot. So yes, I think it is skillful. We're not building up an ego, but we are supporting a healthy, functioning personality. And yeah, it's wholesome. So I guess idealism is something which is potentially very dangerous. Like, I know I shouldn't attach. I think we all have to be honest about the fact that we're very attached. That's just a good place to start. And since we are very attached on all sorts of levels, what can you do that supports the development of wholesome mind states? And then the process of letting go of attachment is a long-term project, and we chip away at it in various ways over a long period of time. So yes, it is wholesome. And I do recommend that you update keep a journal yourself and update it, once a week, once a month. Just note, I did make a donation, I did chant, I did meditate, I did help my friend, I did just acknowledge these things. And because it's a good, if we don't have that friend reading it to us, we want to, sanya, anicca, we do forget things. So we want to be able to recollect ourselves as we're dying, the good things. This retreat, this pilgrimage, this katina, this offering. And we want to be able to recollect that because it's a vibrational thing. If you can bring up that vibration of good, happy occasions, wholesome, auspicious, meritorious occasions, if the mind's got that vibration in the mind as it's passing, where are you going to go? You're going to go to wholesome, auspicious, vibrational places with people who've done similar activities. That's what we're aiming for until you are liberated.
Thank you, Prajan. Prajan, question 3. Kindly explain to a layman like me very slowly what is conditioned and what is unconditioned. Thank you.
So for most people, everything that you experience is conditioned. So your body is a conditioned phenomenon, your thought patterns are conditioned phenomenon, feelings are conditioned phenomenon, the world systems, it's all conditioned phenomenon. And the thing about conditions is that they have causes, which cause them to arise, and they stay for some time and they cease, and they tend to condition new conditions. So simply, everything, sights, sounds, tastes, smells, feelings, it's all conditioned. Earth, water, wind, fire is conditioned. So Lord Buddha's discovery is that there was an unconditioned. And this is very revolutionary and profound consequence, because he was looking at his wife and his son and thinking, these people are bound to aging, sickness, and death. I'm bound to aging, sickness, and death. Everyone I know and love is bound to age, sickness, and death. Aging, sickness, and death. And so he had because he was a high-level bodhisattva, he had the intuition, conviction, awareness that because there are conditions, perhaps there is an unconditioned. So most people don't have an inkling of it at all. And they just think, and they'll come up in their ignorance and delusion. In their ignorance, they'll come up with a deluded interpretation of what is good in the world and how you go about getting ahead in life, because they're not aware that there is an unconditioned. When the Lord Buddha left us the palace of the Bodhisattva and he was walking through the town of Rajgir, he was so stately and handsome and beautiful that the king had his messenger follow him and ask and find out where he is, so that the king could climb up the mountain and ask him, so you look like you're from a great warrior caste, and I'm so touched by your presence and appearance, and please help me rule my kingdom with me. So in terms of conditions, the Buddha had some pretty remarkable conditions, that a king is like climbing up the mountain, asking him to please share rulership of his kingdom with him. And the Buddha said, I'm not interested in wealth or sensuality. I see danger in these things. At which point the king was more impressed, King Bimbisara, and King Bimbisara said, okay, you can have my kingdom. You don't even need to share it. You can have it all. But he was so touched by his goodness, he wanted to witness how would this man rule the kingdom. And then the Bodhisattva said, no, I don't want your kingdom. I'm looking for the unconditioned. At which point King Bimbisara said, well, when you discover it, come back and teach me it. And he did. After Lord Buddha attained and taught the first 5 disciples, and then Yasa and 20 of Yasa's friends, he made his way back he taught the Kassapa brothers and their followings. 1,000 matted hair ascetics became arahants, and they walked into the city of Rajgir, and Indra manifested as a Brahmin youth and sang and danced his way, announcing the lion of men, the conqueror who had realized the unconditioned, had come to Rajgir with his following. So the unconditioned is something that you experience through cultivating the Eightfold Path, or probably the 5 spiritual powers as an easier way to understand it. So faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So what's very interesting thing about the mindfulness is also a condition. So we have to apply ourselves at cultivating, generating, and applying our mindfulness. But mindfulness is the most important condition, probably, because it takes the mind to the point where it will glimpse ultimate reality. So mindfulness is like truth discerning quality. So good mindfulness will see a body as a body, a thought as a thought, feeling as a feeling. And it's not making a self out of it. Or foundations of mindfulness. And then the more mindfulness a person has in the present moment, seeing things clearly as they are, the mind will begin to glimpse the unconditioned. And that's our ultimate nature. It's not something outside. There's other suttas where great monks are traveling, leaping through universes, trying to find where the conditioned world ends, and coming back to the Buddha, and the Buddha is saying, no. That's not where you find the end of the conditions. The place where you find the end of the conditions is within this fathom-long body. Another monk was trying it through going up to the higher and higher and higher heaven realms, asking Brahma, the most radiant Brahma Deva, where is it? Where does the conditions cease? And then Brahma Deva sent him back to the Buddha. Ask the Buddha. Again, it's within this fathom-long body. So it's not in the body, but your conventional self with this mind-body phenomenon, if you are diligent in cultivating the 4 foundations of mindfulness with this situation, that is where you're going to glimpse Nibbana. So the unconditioned is another, Nibbana is another word for the unconditioned. The deathless is another word for the unconditioned. So we have sankharas, which are conditions, and we have asankhata, the unconditioned. So practice is what will reveal the unconditioned. And the unconditioned is not nothing. It's not nothingness. It's, this is a discussion debated among Buddhist scholars for millennia, the difference between nothingness and emptiness. So awareness actually has an empty nature, but it's a thing. And so we can know the empty nature of phenomena. That means empty of what? Empty of solidity, empty of self, and simply being aware of your feelings as they arise and cease, your thoughts as they arise and cease, being aware of it and putting it down, aware of it and putting it down, aware of it and putting it down. Not grasping at the conditions. The mind will have moments where it glimpses the unconditioned, and we'll have that experience of this is better. This is the happiness and contentment that is experienced through putting down, clinging to conditions is superior. And the self-view, it doesn't get nuked, it doesn't get destroyed, it doesn't get killed through any kind of act of violence. It just gets let go of because it's a misperception, a misapprehension. When the mind has a more truth-discerning awareness, mindfulness and clear comprehension, it just sees things truthfully. So the self-view falls away because it's not relevant, it's not the truth. And the mind will glimpse deeper truth, ultimate truth, and the potential that is right there in all of us. So practice a lot and you will begin to glimpse the unconditioned. When you begin to glimpse the unconditioned, you will probably practice even more, and then you'll experience the unconditioned for periods of time. And you will understand the nature of conditions. That's what having glimpses into the unconditioned does. It's like a mirror. You know the nature of conditions, arising, staying for some time, ceasing, not I, not mine. But the Arahants, they can still have conversations. They still have their personalities. They just understand that these things are conventions, while they experience that which is beyond conventions. So, anyway, I hope that was helpful.
Ajahn, question 4. Dear Ajahn, how does one get rid of self? I understand that fear, conceit, ego are all related to self. And I notice this attachment to self every now and then in daily life, and it brings up much unwholesome qualities in the mind. May I know how can one progress in getting rid of the attachment to self? Thank you.
So exactly what we're doing, dana, sila, and mental cultivation. It is good to observe the way perceiving things as a self and grasping as a self creates negativity. It gives negativity a place to reside. I don't really like the phrase get rid of, because essentially we have to work with it. We have to work with it because it's such a deep habit, perceiving things as a self. And there's no trick, there's no kind of like Zen like koan where you can just get rid of it and that's it. Don't have to deal with it anymore. You have to abide with it, and you have to steward its healthy functioning. So we were talking about that. We have to be generous. We have to be ethical so that we don't hate ourselves in part. And so that because that's just a huge sense of self. Like hating yourself is a huge sense of self. It's very conceited and it wastes a lot of time. So don't do that. And we have to have healthy self-care, and we have to have a healthy stewarding of the personality. And as we train ourselves, I often contemplated that there's a very clear link between a healthy sense of confidence and a healthy sense of humility. They go together. Knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're not good at, just truthfully, just objectively, these things support one another. Like knowing what your strengths are, knowing where you're improving, having healthy self-esteem. That gives a really good foundation for knowing what you're not very good at yet, or what you need to improve on. And so healthy confidence and healthy humility, modesty go together. And daily meditation is what I think in the beginning what we can do is we have to practice helps us to grasp at it less. So grasping at things as being a self is still there, but the grasping is less tight. So what that might mean is in the future where you just had, in the past where you just had to say something, somebody irritated you, as you practice more, maybe you don't have to say. It's like, I could say it, all right, or I might not say it, There's more spaciousness around it. It's like you might still want to say it, but you can ask yourself, will it be skillful? Will it help the situation? And so in my experience, the sense of self becomes more porous and reflective, and you get more space around it. So you learn how to use it. Okay, I want to say this, but would that be skillful? If I am going to say it, when will I say it? How will I say it? You just get a lot more skillful with it. And mostly in the meditation practice, I think, that sense of self falling away for periods of time. And then you'll notice how much happier you are, not picking it up. And then you come out of meditation and the sense of self comes back and says, oh, that was a great meditation. I just had a great meditation. It's like, it's so fast because that habit is so deep. And we just have to work with that. It's like, and in terms of, it's the deeper levels of insight that when people see not self and abide in awareness that knows a body, and there's no sense of self grasping it out for a period of time, insight, vipassana insight, just where the deeper level of mind sees the sense of self fall away and abides in an awareness of the situation without the self view being present. In my experience, that usually occurs in retreat-like situations, and very important to do those retreats so that you can begin to have those kinds of levels of insights. Because it's fascinating to see that the body can be there and the mind can be peaceful, and there's no sense of self, no grasping, just a sense of empty awareness, knowing phenomenon, and a lot of tranquility and serenity in that well-being. And then selfie comes back again. And it's like, but then you understand, oh, it is a view. It's a habitual way of seeing things. It's one way of looking at it, but it's not the deeper truth. So we actually have to have a lot of metta and compassion for ourselves, because this feeling of being a self and interpreting things as a self is going to go on for quite a while. It's arahants, the level between anagami and arahant. So that's what, so the stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, arahant, 4 levels of enlightenment. Sometimes it's presented as 8 levels, path and fruit at each level. It's the anagami who uproots all vanity, latent grasping of things as being a self. So you're talking about between the 3rd and the 4th level of complete liberation is where the mind stops perceiving things as being a self completely. So the stream enterer has deep insight into not self. And it was described, I can't remember if they use the analogy of a rose or a lotus. Some arahants were talking to an anagami, like why, they wanted to help him to become arahants, let go of his final grasping. He was saying, I can see the pistils, I can see the petals, I can see the stem, and I can see that none of it is the flower. And he said, but he described it, he says, but it still smells like a flower. And it's just this, the fragrance, it's like the self-view, it's like the anagami can see all of it, elements as elements, bodies as bodies, thoughts as thoughts, not self, not self. He or she knows it's not self. And yet it's a feeling of being a self. It's still present. So that's, even anagamis are dealing with that. So we can't nuke it, we can't get rid of it, we have to learn how to work with it and have insights into it not being ultimate truth. And this is where I think the Brahma Viharas are enormously helpful, because you have kindness and compassion for this phenomenon, because you can't destroy it with ill will or hatred or willfulness or determination. You can't. You just become, if you try to do that, you just become very brittle, very tense, very negative, and very unpleasant and to be with. It doesn't work. And I've in my 2+ decades of being a bhikkhu and seen many fine young men coming to get enlightened and see what happens when they decide that they're going to destroy the self-view or kill the kilesas. How unpleasant it is to be near them. And they often don't last, because that's not how it works. So gentle and consistent plodding with ever increasing efforts, then you will grasp at the sense of self less and less and develop insight into it more and more. So have loving kindness and compassion for the conventional being in the process.
Question 5. Hi Ajahn, can you talk about awareness meditation? Thank you.
So I'm not completely sure which meditation the person is asking about, but I know that in Dzogchen practice, for example, in the Nyingma tradition, and Mahamudra practice in the, as it's called in the Gelugpa tradition, where a meditator takes awareness as the meditation object instead of picking up meditation objects. So the thing to understand about this is that it is an advanced practice. So in the Vajrayana, they weren't teaching Dzogchen and Mahamudra to beginning practitioners. And what's very interesting about it is that they came up with these rites and rituals or processes where you would have to do 100,000 of a 100-syllable mantra, 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 mandala visualizations and prayers and dedications. And what's very interesting about that is, while doing that, the practitioner is actually developing mindfulness of objects. It's not marketed in that way. It's been marketed towards people who have a faith proclivity. that if you do 100,000 of these mantras, you will purify the mind and make the mind ready for its greater practice. But actually the person has to keep a track. How many vows did I do? How many mantras did I do? They have to memorize those mantras. They have to be doing those mantras. So they're mindful of the mantra. They're mindful of their body while they're doing the prostration. They're mindful of the mandala visualization. They're doing all sorts of preparation practice so that after, and sometimes they would go and see the guru, and the guru would say, yeah, you're not quite ready, go and do it again. And they'd have to do another 100,000 mantras, another 100,000 prostrations, another 100,000 mandala visualizations. And then they come back and say, okay, now I'll take awareness. Now I'll take the awareness that, so, if you're doing 1,000 prostrations a day, full length prostrations, I have some experience of this. I didn't get up to 1,000 a day, but I was doing 500 a day for a period of time in Bogaya. There will be periods of time where the mind finds a sense of spacious, clear awareness, and with the body bowing. It's similar to what we do in the forest tradition of walking meditation. We'll be walking one end of the walking path, stopping, turning around, walking to another end of the walking path. There's periods where there's just awareness of a body walking, and the mind is resting in that awareness. The first part of it, you're being aware of the feelings at the bottom of the feet. You have to intend to be aware of the feelings at the bottom of the feet. Helps you to not be lost in your thoughts. Helps you to be in the body in the present moment. Keep doing it. A sense of palpable awareness and presence arises in the mind, and there's awareness of a body walking. So for experienced meditators, you place the awareness on the object, you become mindful of the object. And the way I experience it is, at a certain point, the awareness itself becomes more present and palpable in the mind than the meditation object. And then one can rest in that awareness. So it's like the meditation object is what allows the mindfulness to become more fully present. And then one can rest in that fully present mindfulness. But I think it's difficult to just decide that one is going to do awareness meditation, because awareness is often compromised by the 5 hindrances. There is a sense of self-experiencing sensuality, craving for, craving not for, restlessness, doubt, sloth, and torpor. That's what's normally there. So one does have to apply oneself at the knowing the object and keeping the object in mind. And then when the presence of mind itself, so for example, you're doing mindfulness of breathing and Buddha is there. At a certain point, the mind becomes happy to be with the breath to the point that it doesn't need Buddha. So Buddha falls away. And there's just the awareness of the breath. And then sometimes the breath becomes so subtle and the peacefulness becomes so pronounced that the mind can't feel the breath anymore, but the peacefulness became the object. So that's kind of the object gets more refined and more wholesome as a process. And it is good to rest in peaceful awareness. And the important thing is to notice when the mind comes out of that, comes down to a more coarse, ordinary state and starts thinking again. One has to be determined to pick up the meditation object again and restrain the mind from going into, because what can happen is all of the peacefulness quickly evaporates and disappears if the mind picks up an unwholesome fantasy or thinking train after that. So.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, question number 6. Is it a waste of time to ponder about the characteristics of the citta, mind? Can the contemplation of mind help in the progress of reaching liberation? Thank you.
So this is actually a very similar question to the previous one, awareness meditation. So I think it is wholesome to contemplate the nature of the mind, but the issue is most people can't yet. So the way Ajahn teaches the cultivation of the four foundations of mindfulness is to make the awareness of the body the foundation of the practice. So awareness of the feelings of the breath, feelings arising to body-based contact, so awareness of the breath, awareness of the footsteps, awareness of postures. In doing this, in keeping a consistent awareness in the body and in the present moment, one naturally becomes more aware of the thoughts that one is thinking, whether they're wholesome or whether they're unwholesome, because present moment mindfulness is clarity. And then so when you've established this clarity and this presence, it sees things more clearly. So you will notice whether you will notice with more clarity whether mindfulness are wholesome, mind states are wholesome, neutral, or unwholesome. And then you will also notice that they arise, stay for some time, and cease. And you will notice certain things that trigger the arising of certain mind states. You develop more insights about the importance of sense restraint, how to protect the mind, guard the mind, etc., etc. But the area of it's the same. It's this glimpsing the unconditioned, or it's taking the awareness as the object. It's advanced stages. It's what occurs when you begin to have experience of pure mind. I think an area where it's helpful is in the initial stages. Those kinds of experiences don't last for very long. They're profound. So the practitioner definitely knows that they experience something really amazing, really peaceful, really wonderful. And then it becomes a memory. There's a sense of self again with the hindrances and the struggle. So where I think it is helpful is recollecting the experience one had to remind oneself that that deeper truth is still there, and as an encouragement. And later on, yes, it's probably one of the ways that the anagami purifies the mind of the last subtle vanity of self-view, is just abiding in the unconditioned, because the stream enterer begins to have experiences of nibbana. It's not constant, but they can experience nibbana after their initial experience of it. And it's with the sakadagami and anagami, they can abide in nibbana more frequently for longer periods of time. So it's simply abiding in pure mind is kind of burning up the impurities in the mind. But it's advanced practice. That's what I heard.
Thank you, Prajan. Prajan, question 7. How do we explain the growth of the human population in terms of kamma? At the time of the Buddha, there were not billions of humans on this planet. How can the explosion in population be explained? Are more beings evolving gradually and moving from the lower realms into the human realms? Fewer humans moving down into the lower realms, such as animals and ghost realms. Does it mean that the collective kamma of human is getting better and more beings have access to the human realm? Thank you.
Since the COVID phenomenon that began occurring a couple of years ago, I think another 250 million human beings have fallen into abject poverty. 250 million more humans don't have enough to eat. So I don't think it's the case that the collective karma of humans is getting better. It's that the human situation is becoming more ghost and animal-like for a large percentage of those humans. So a lot of people at the moment have human bodies with ghost and animal realities. So I wish it was the case that the human situation was always better than the animal situation, and that the overall picture was getting better. But the way I understand it is this Buddha became enlightened in the degenerating part of the eon. So eons, they have like waves where things that come up and then they come down. So that's a kind of, I think it is skillful and it's helpful to know this, because one of the things that causes good people to suffer is that sense that we all have of, it shouldn't be like this. It just shouldn't be like this. And it's like, yeah, but it is like this, right? So oftentimes we just have to realize that our preferences for how samsara would be are most of the time not very relevant, unfortunately, because we're nice people, we have nice preferences. If we were in charge of samsara, it would be a much nicer place, right? But unfortunately, we're not. But it's helpful to understand that, it's like Ajahn told me that 3 out of 4 human beings currently are coming from animal or ghost realms. So that's literally why our world is becoming more demonic and animal-like, is because a lot of the beings being born into it are not coming in with vast merits. They're coming in with darker minds and unfortunately less merits than the previous generations. So it's good to know that, because it will, don't waste too much time with idealistic fantasies about how much better it could be and should be and how much better you will make it when you have the group karma of 7 billion people and 4 billion of them don't have a truly human mind. It's the way I see it is it's like this sangha. We meet, we discuss Dhamma, we support each other in practice. These are like islands of the good people who are going from light to more light or from dark to light. We need to stick together and support each other. And when we see horrible things happening around us, we just need to understand that that's part of the program at this point in samsara, at this dot in the samsaric conditioned world, and at this point on the timeline, things are going down. In general, morality is degenerating. And so, the way it's frustrating, because I can see in my generation that most people want to protect the environment more. Most people don't want wars. Most people are willing to pay a bit more tax and support poor people and be generous and kind and friendly, like most people that I know my whole life. But because most human beings don't keep the 5 precepts, they're not truly human in their level of merit. And what that means is that I've done some study of psychology. 1% of the population is a psychopath. 1%, 2% of the population is a sociopath. Another 1 or 2% is a malignant narcissist. So you've got 5%, according to the psychology textbooks, 1 in 20 people have no empathy, none. They only think in terms of power, domineering. And so that's why the world is such a terrible place, because if people are willing to do anything to be in a dominant position, that's how we get where we are now. And the 19 out of 20 people are just assuming that everybody's like them. And the 1 in 20 are getting together and planning how to kill us and destroy us and steal our wealth and do what they do. And so we need to support one another in this process and understand that there is a lot of darkness in samsara, and it goes down. And then it's like when the Shakyamuni Buddha came, you can see now is that about 500 or 600 million of 7 billion human beings are Buddhist. When Maitreya Buddha comes, the whole world will be Buddhist. And there's reasons for this. It's because our Buddha spent 4 asankhya plus 100,000 eons as a bodhisattva, becoming a Buddha who would become enlightened in the degenerating part of the eon. So he has the merit that could affect the fact that 2,000 years after his enlightenment, there would be 500 million people who have karmic connections with him to calling themselves Buddhists. But there's 6.5 billion others who aren't. In the time of Maitreya, because Maitreya spends 20 asankhyas plus 100,000 eons, he spent 5 times longer in his bodhisattva path, so that when he becomes the Buddha, just after the peak of the Eon, human beings are living for 80,000 years. There is no war, there's no famine. Very interesting for the debate about sexism and all these things. Apparently, 84,000 princes go forth on the first day and 84,000 princesses go forth on the first day, and they all become arahants on that day, because there's no bigotry. It's a representation of the merit of the people who get born at that time. It's like they have so little hatred, they don't make issues out of these things. It's not a kind of a power struggle kind of a point in the eon. It's everybody is like a deva, everybody's like an angel at that time. The human world is closer to the heaven realms. Apparently there's no storms, there's no earthquakes, there's no wars, there's no famine, there's no sickness. The only sickness is hunger and aging and death. But it's good to know this, because the causes that cause that world to appear that way is everybody keeping impeccable precepts for a long time, everybody meditating, everybody chanting, everybody doing their practice. Then all those people get born together. And then Maitreya comes. So, you know, long-term strategic optimism. In the long term, it's going to get better. About 300 million years away. And until then, we need to do what we can do to keep our trajectory a wholesome one and our spiritual evolution on track.
Sadhu. Present is 20 minutes past 9. And
Yeah.
do we continue with one question, or do we want to proceed to the asking for 3 refuges and 5 precepts?
Okay, let's do that. Yeah, we'll keep the other question for next time. In Theravadan Buddhism, we often have a frequent taking of precepts and refuges. There's a few ways to see this. In general, it's seen as, the Sangha is seen as this, all of the monks and nuns, and also the enlightened practitioners since the Buddha's time. And so some people go to refuge to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha as a I guess what I'm saying is there's different. Some people like to relate to it in a way where they feel like they're going to refuge with their teacher, because that helps them to feel a connection with that teacher. So if people want to feel a connection with a teacher, having taken precepts and refuge with that teacher can be helpful to some people. So if some people want to see it that way, I took refuges and I took precepts with Ajahn. If that's helpful to you, you can see it that way. But there are other ways to see it. You can take refuges and precepts by yourself in front of your Buddha statue, and you don't need a monk or a nun there. Or you can go to refuge with Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha as a vast field of refuge objects. But you can relate to it however you think would be helpful to you at this point in time. And I'm happy to give the precepts and refuges.
Thank you, Prajan. Dear friends, if you like to join me, there's just a few sentences before as a request for the 3 refuges and 5 precepts. If you'd like to join me, then I invite you to get on your Anjali position, and then you can add your own place, just chant after me according to the text showing. Mayam bante tisaranena saha pancasilani yachama. Dutiyampi mayam bante tisaranena saha pancasilani yachama. Tatiyampi mayam bante tisaranena saha pancasilani yachama.
So we can do the Namo Tassa and Buddhaṃ Saranam Gacchāmi part together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, dhammang saranang gacchami, sanghang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tisarana gamanang nitithang.
Kamma bante.
Please say the precept after me. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature.
Atinatana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Adarinada veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given.
Kamesu michachara veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Kamesu michachara veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct.
I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct.
Musawada veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from lying and harsh speech.
I undertake the precept to refrain from lying, harsh speech.
Surap merayap machapamathatana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Sura miraya maja pamadatana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness.
I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani samadhiyami. Sit lena sukating yanti, sit lena poka sampada, sit lena nibuting yanti tasama silang visotaye.
Everyone.
These are the five precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore, let virtue be purified.
Everyone, please join me in saying 3 times of sadhu and then bow 3 times to Ajahn. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. First bow. Second bow. Third bow. Thank you so much.
These words sikkhapadani means it's a sikha, means it's a training. So if you are already keeping them impeccably, perfectly, then please maintain that standard. If you are breaking them sometimes, then you try to break them less often. As it's a process of purifying one's virtue. So take care. Don't get too depressed about the state of samsara. This is just the way it is. And recollect your potential to be liberated from it, and keep cultivating your inner refuge. Take care.
We have you as our guiding light, Rajan.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.